Hey, it's me. I'm here to tell you about post-Reconstruction era and the era of terror, with the focus being Jim Crow laws. Now, they're pretty complicated subjects, so let's start right off with the Civil War's ending. For a recap, the Civil War ended, and with the North being victorious, this resulted in the emancipation of slaves. The United States endeavored to build a new society where all men are equal. To protect equality, the U.S. Constitution was modified with three important amendments. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment included language stating that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction to equal rights protection under the law. The 15th Amendment prohibited denying citizens the right to vote based on race or color. Unfortunately, this reconstruction of society didn't go so smoothly. The South was not interested in equality or in an integrated society. They wanted as much as possible to keep things the way they were before the Civil War. The legislators in various southern states responded by enacted laws that continued to suppress the rights of people of different races to keep them separate from white society. These laws were referred to as Black Codes or Jim Crow laws. Now this brought up the question, how can laws like Black Codes coexist with the 13th and 14th Amendments? How could Black Code laws strip people of their rights when the U.S. Constitution specifically says that is not allowed? Questions like these are usually decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. One of the most historic U.S. Supreme Court cases, Plessy versus Ferguson, in 1896, answered that question. This case was about a black man named Homer Plessy who had the courage to ride in the white-only passenger section of a railroad car. He argued that a law that required separate sections for different races was unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court, in what some have described as the worst decision in Supreme Court history, held 7-1 that the law required separate but equal accommodations was not unconstitutional. The court rejected arguments that the law was inherently implied that black people were inferior. The court's decision led to the separate but equal doctrine. The separate but equal doctrine legitimized Black Codes, Jim Crow laws, and regulations of that sort. That paved way for any passage of additional similar laws. The southern states passed all sorts of Jim Crow laws, including laws that segregated schools, segregated public places like hotels and restaurants, and limited property rights such as where people could buy a home. These unjust laws were obviously like a ball and chain, slowing down the reconstruction of the United States to become a fair and equal society. But those in power over others in the South were fine with that. Fortunately, there were brave and tenacious people who over a long period of time fought for change. In 1909, the NAACP, which stands for National Association for Advancement of Colored People, was founded. The NAACP protested for rights and equality, and for laws such as Jim Crow laws to be abolished. Society had also started to change as time progressed. Some of the public, black and white, grew tired of the abuse and injustice they saw in their daily lives or news. This resulted in some political pressure for positive change as well. It wasn't until 1954, nearly 60 years after Plessy versus Ferguson, that the law of the land changed. The Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education had determined that the segregation based on race in school was unconstitutional. The previous separate but equal doctrine was inherently fair and overruled. Over time, many other cases came before the Supreme Court in which the Supreme Court continued to rule against the Jim Crow laws. In 1964, the remaining laws were overruled by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Acts of 1965, ending the era of segregation seen in laws and enforcement. These events have changed our country, moving it closer to a society where all men and women are equal. According to President and Founding Father John Adams, our nation is supposed to be a nation of laws and not of men. Therefore, the institution of the United States Supreme Court played a role in how our country recovered from our time in slavery, as well as playing a role in impending progress, and eventually played a role in bringing us closer together to society where men and women are all equal under the law. Throughout this time period, The Supreme Court justices reviewed and issued decisions about these institutions. We now have equal protection clause in the 14th Amendment that is stronger today because of those decisions. For example, racial segregation in schools and elsewhere is no longer deemed equal under the 14th Amendment, thanks to the court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education. In other court cases, also, in response to these institutions, people organized to influential groups such as the NAACP that forced changes in how we approach race in this country. As a result of the NAACP, protests and the help of other activists, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 were passed into law. Although we have abolished laws and codes that are racially discriminatory, the damage done by slavery and the less than perfect way our country handled the post-Reconstruction era continues to haunt our society today. Unfortunately, the more than 400-year history of racial injustice continues to deeply impact us today. Racial injustice, to the extent in which it exists and how to address it, continues to be a hotly debated topic. Since those institutions were prevalent in our country, we've come a long way in terms of race and justice, but we've still got a long way to go.